When my son Brandon died, his wife Vanessa inherited the house and $80 million or so, she thought. Then she kicked me out, saying, "You are not welcome here anymore. Go die in a dumpster." A few days later, my lawyer laughed and asked her, "Did you listen carefully to the will?" What was in the will made my daughter-in-law faint. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. I am Conrad, 67 years old, and I have spent my life building empires only to watch my own castle crumble in a single afternoon. The rain at the cemetery was not a drizzle. It was a deluge, as if the sky itself was trying to wash away the stain of what was happening. I stood over the open grave of my only son, Brandon. He was 40 years old. Too young. Too good for this world, and certainly too good for the woman standing next to me. Vanessa checked her phone. The screen of her device was the only light in the gloomy afternoon. She was not crying. She was scrolling. I could see the reflection of a social media feed in her designer sunglasses. She wore a black dress, but it was cut too low and hemmed too high for a funeral. It was a cocktail dress masquerading as mourning attire. "Can we wrap this up?" she whispered loud enough for the priest to pause his eulogy. "My heels are sinking into the mud, Conrad." I looked at her. I did not blink. This woman had been married to my son for 5 years. In those 5 years, she had spent more money than most people earn in a lifetime. Brandon had loved her with a blindness that terrified me. He saw a queen. I saw a parasite. "Have some respect, Vanessa," I said, my voice low. "This is your husband," was she replied, snapping her gum. "He is gone, Conrad. Standing here getting soaked is not going to bring him back. Besides, I have a meeting with the estate planner at 5. I need to make sure the assets are liquid." A hand landed on my shoulder. It was heavy and unwanted. I turned to see Jared. He was Brandon's personal trainer, or so he claimed. He was 28 years old, with muscles that came from a bottle and a smile that never reached his eyes. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, clearly intended to show off his physique rather than show respect for the dead. "You should listen to her, Conrad," Jared said, his tone mockingly gentle. "Vanessa is under a lot of stress. Grief hits everyone differently." "Grief does not look like checking Instagram," I said, shaking his hand off my shoulder. Vanessa laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "You are so old-fashioned, Conrad. That is why Brandon never listened to you. He knew you were a relic. Now are you coming back to the house, or are you going to stand here and talk to the dirt all day?" "I am staying," I said. "I will find my own way back." "Suit yourself," she said. She turned on her heel, mud splattering the hem of her expensive dress. "Come on, Jared. Drive me." My hands are shaking too much to hold the wheel. I watched them walk away. They did not look back. Not once. They walked close together, too close for a widow and a family friend. I saw Jared place his hand on the small of her back as he opened the car door for her. It was a gesture of possession, not comfort. I turned back to the coffin. The workers were waiting respectfully at a distance. I nodded to them, giving permission to lower my boy into the cold earth. I stood there for another hour until the hole was filled and the rain had soaked through my coat to my skin. I did not feel the cold. I felt a fire burning in my chest, a fire that had been smoldering for years and was now ready to consume everything in its path. I whispered a promise to the wet earth. I promised Brandon that I would fix the mistake I made 10 years ago. I promised him that the vultures would not feed on his legacy. I hailed a taxi to get back to the estate. The driver, a man with kind eyes, looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Rough day, sir?" he asked. "The roughest," I said. He did not push. He just drove. We wound our way through the iron gates of the community, winding up the hill to the manor that I had bought 15 years ago. It was a sprawling estate overlooking the ocean, a place meant for grandchildren and barbecues and legacy. Now it looked like a fortress. I paid the driver and stepped out. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and humid. I walked up the stone path to the massive oak front doors. I reached for my keys, but then I stopped. I decided to use the keypad. I punched in the code, 1980, the year Brandon was born. The light on the pad turned red. A harsh electronic buzz rejected my entry. I frowned. I tried again. 1980. Red light. Denied. I tried a third time, thinking my old fingers were slippery from the rain. Denied. Conrad, a voice called out from above. I stepped back and looked up. Vanessa was standing on the master bedroom balcony. She held a glass of champagne in one hand. The funeral black was gone. She was wearing a silk robe that shimmered in the porch lights. "You are entering the wrong code," she said, taking a sip of her drink. "Open the door." "Vanessa," I said. "I am tired. I need to rest." "The code changed," she said casually, leaning over the railing. "It is a new era, Conrad. New owner, new code." "Stop playing games," I said, my patience fraying like an old rope. "I live here. This is my house." Was she corrected? It was your house. Then you gave it to Brandon. And now Brandon is dead. And I am his sole heir. That makes it my house. And I have decided that I do not want a roommate, especially not a sour old man who judges my every move. I stared at her, unable to comprehend the sheer audacity. "You cannot be serious. My things are in there. My medicine. The papers." "Oh, do not worry about that," she said. She waved her hand dismissively. "Jared." The front door opened, but I could not enter. Jared stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance like a bouncer at a cheap club. He was smirking. Beside him were two large suitcases. My suitcases. They were wet. They had been sitting in the foyer, but Jared shoved them forward with his foot, sending them tumbling down the stone steps. They landed in the mud at my feet with a sickening thud. One of the latches popped open, spilling my shirts and socks into the dirty puddle. "There you go," Jared said. "Packed everything myself, even your toothbrush. We are thorough." Vanessa laughed from the balcony. It was the sound of a hyena sensing a carcass. "Look at him, Jared. He looks like a wet dog." "You cannot do this," I said, my voice shaking not from fear, but from a rage so intense it made my vision blur. "This is illegal. I have rights." "Call the police then," Vanessa challenged. "Tell them you are trying to enter a property you do not own." "I have the deed, Conrad. I have the marriage certificate. And I have the law on my side. You are trespassing. If you are not off my driveway in 5 minutes, I will have you arrested for harassment." I looked down at my clothes in the mud. Among the shirts, something glinted. It was a silver frame. The photograph of my late wife, Catherine. It was the last picture taken of her before the cancer took her away. She was smiling, holding Brandon when he was a baby. It was my most possession. I reached for it. Jared stepped forward. He brought his polished leather boot down on the frame. Crunch. The sound was louder than thunder in my ears. The glass shattered. The silver bent. He twisted his heel, grinding the glass into the photograph, destroying the smiling face of the woman I loved more than life itself. "Oops," Jared said without a shred of remorse. "Clumsy me." I froze. I looked at the shards of glass mixed with the mud. I looked at Jared's smug face. Then I looked up at Vanessa, who was toasting the scene with her champagne. At that moment, something inside me snapped. But it was not a snap of hysteria. It was the snap of a lock clicking into place. The final barrier of mercy had been removed. They had not just kicked me out. They had desecrated my sanctuary. They had declared war. I did not scream. I did not lunge at Jared. I knew I could not win a physical fight with a 28-year-old steroid user. I was 67. I had a bad hip and a heart condition, but I had something they did not. I had a brain that had built a logistics empire from a single truck. I slowly bent down. I picked up the ruined photo frame, shaking the mud off it. I placed it gently in the suitcase. I closed the latch. "You are right, Vanessa," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "It is a new era. Enjoy the house." I grabbed the handles of my suitcases. They were heavy, soaked with rain and mud. I turned my back on them. "Go die in a dumpster, old man," Vanessa shouted after me. "That is where trash belongs." I heard the heavy oak door slam shut. I heard the lock click. I began to walk. The driveway was a mile long. The wheels of the suitcases dragged through the gravel. My breath came in short, painful gasps. I was a 67-year-old man walking into the night with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart full of cold steel. Halfway down the hill, a sports car roared behind me. The headlights blinded me for a second. It was Brandon's Porsche. The car I had bought him for his 35th birthday. The car swerved close to me. Too close. It hit a large puddle on the side of the road. A wave of cold, muddy water crashed over me, soaking me from head to toe. I heard laughter as the car sped away. Jared was driving. I saw Vanessa's silhouette in the passenger seat, her hand thrown back in delight. They were heading into town, probably to a club, to celebrate their newfound freedom and wealth. I wiped the mud from my eyes. I did not stop walking. It took me 2 hours to reach the edge of town. I found a motel, the kind with neon signs that flickered and buzzed and charged by the hour. The clerk behind the glass partition looked at my muddy suit and my wet suitcases with suspicion. "Cash up front," the clerk said, not looking up from his magazine. I reached into my pocket. My wallet was wet, but the cash was still good. I placed $300 on the counter. "I need a room for a week," I said, "and a burner phone." The clerk raised an eyebrow but took the money. He slid a key and a cheap plastic-wrapped phone under the glass. "Room 4. Don't make a mess." I dragged my luggage into the room. It smelled of stale smoke and lemon cleaner. The carpet was sticky. The wallpaper was peeling. It was a long way from the master suite of the manor. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. I did not unpack. I took the burner phone out of its plastic. I inserted the battery. It powered up with a cheerful little chime that sounded ridiculous in the gloomy room. I knew the number by heart. I did not need to look it up. It was a number I had not called in 10 years. A number reserved for the absolute worst-case scenario. I dialed. It rang once, twice. "Fairbanks Legal Services," a voice answered. It was crisp, professional, and familiar. "Hello, Arthur," I said. There was a silence on the other end. A long, pregnant pause. Then the tone of the voice changed. It dropped an octave, losing its professional detachment and gaining a note of genuine shock. "Conrad, is that you? I heard about Brandon. I am so sorry. I tried to reach you at the house, but the house is compromised." I cut him off. My voice was steady, devoid of the emotion that was tearing me apart inside. "Vanessa has initiated a hostile takeover. I have been evicted." "Jesus, Conrad," Arthur breathed. "I told you this might happen. I told you she was a viper when he married her. Where are you? I will send a car." "No," I said. "No cars? No paper trail? Not yet. She thinks I am a senile old man who is going to fade away into a nursing home. She thinks she has won. She thinks she has $80 million and the Hamptons estate." "She is wrong," Arthur said. "We both know she is wrong." I looked at the mud on my shoes. I looked at the cheap motel room. I thought about the picture of Catherine crushed under Jared's boot. "I want to initiate the Omega Protocol," I said. There was another silence. Longer this time. Conrad Arthur said, his voice warning. The Omega Protocol is scorched earth. If we do this, there is no going back. It will destroy her completely. It will leave her with nothing. It might even put her in prison. Are you sure you want to go that far? She is still Brandon's widow. She is not a widow, I said coldly. She is a grave robber. And she told me to go die in a dumpster. So I am going to show her exactly who owns the dumpster and who owns the trash. I could hear Arthur shifting in his chair. I could almost hear the smile spreading across his face, the shark smelling blood in the water. All right, Conrad, he said. I am opening the file now. The trust fund stipulations are clear. The LLC structure is ironclad. When do you want to drop the hammer? Not yet, I said. Let her think she is rich. Let her spend. Let her climb so high that when she falls, the impact will shatter every bone in her financial body. I want her to feel safe. I want her to invite the whole world to watch her victory. And then I want to take it all away in front of everyone. Understood, Arthur said. I will freeze the auxiliary accounts tomorrow morning, but I will leave the credit lines open. We will let her dig her own hole. Good, I said. And Arthur? Yes, Conrad. Find out everything about a man named Jared. I want to know where he was born, what he eats, and what he fears. He broke Catherine's picture. I want to break his life. Consider it done, Arthur said. Get some sleep, old friend. The war starts tomorrow. I hung up the phone. I stripped off my muddy clothes and walked into the shower. The water was lukewarm and the pressure was weak. But as I scrubbed the mud from my skin, I felt lighter than I had in years. I was not just a grieving father anymore. I was a CEO again. I was a general. And I was about to teach my daughter-in-law a lesson that $80 million could not fix. I turned off the shower and stared at myself in the cracked mirror. The eyes staring back were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of the executioner. Vanessa wanted a show. I was going to give her a blockbuster. My burner phone buzzed against the cheap laminate table of the motel room. It was a vibration that rattled the plastic cup of lukewarm coffee I was nursing. I did not need to look at the screen to know what it was. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. Across town in the glittering district of high-end retail, Vanessa was busy digging her own grave with a piece of plastic. I sat in the dim light of the motel and opened the banking app that Arthur had mirrored to my secure device. I watched the numbers roll in real time like a ticker tape of greed. $3,000 at a French lingerie boutique, $5,000 at a designer shoe store, $12,000 for handbags. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. I knew exactly where she was. I knew the smell of the perfume pumped into the air of those boutiques and the hushed, reverent tones of the sales assistants. I could imagine Vanessa striding through the glass doors, not as a grieving widow, but as a conqueror claiming her spoils. In the flagship store of a luxury watchmaker on Fifth Avenue, the air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees. Vanessa marched in with Jared trailing behind her like a loyal guard dog who had just been promised a steak. The store was empty, save for a young sales associate named Elena, who looked up with a polite, professional smile. "Good afternoon, Madame," Elena said, stepping out from behind the polished mahogany counter. "How may I assist you today?" Vanessa did not return the smile. She removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that were scanning the room with predatory assessment. She did not look at Elena. She looked through her. "I want to see the chronographs," Vanessa announced. "The gold ones. Not the stainless steel garbage you keep in the front case. Take me to the back room where you keep the real inventory." Elena blinked, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Of course, Madame. Do you have an appointment with us?" Vanessa laughed. It was a sharp bark of a laugh that made Jared snicker. "Appointment? Honey, do you know who I am? I am Mrs. Brandon Vance. I just inherited the Vance estate. I could buy this entire building and turn it into a closet for my shoes. Now get the manager and get the champagne. I am not here to browse. I am here to stimulate the economy. I watched the transaction alert pop up on my phone. She had just tipped the valet $50 before even entering the store. She was throwing money around to buy respect, but all she was purchasing was contempt. Back in the store, the manager, a man named Claude, appeared. He was seasoned enough to recognize the smell of new money and desperation. He ushered them into the private viewing room. He poured the complimentary champagne. Vanessa took a sip and grimaced. "Is this vintage?" she asked loud enough for the entire staff to hear. "It tastes like vinegar. Next time I come in here, have something decent chilled." Jared was already leaning over the velvet tray of watches. His eyes were wide with greed. He pointed a thick finger at a rose gold timepiece encrusted with diamonds. It was gaudy. It was loud. It was exactly the kind of watch Brandon would have hated. Brandon preferred understated elegance. He wore a simple leather strap watch that I had given him for graduation. "I like this one, babe," Jared said, sliding the heavy watch onto his wrist. He flexed his arm, admiring the way the diamonds caught the light. "It looks like power." Vanessa swirled her glass, looking at him with a possessive smirk. "It suits you. It matches the car." "How much is it?" Claude cleared his throat. "That particular model is a limited edition. It retails for $45,000. Vanessa did not flinch. She did not even blink. She waved her hand dismissively, as if $45,000 was the price of a sandwich. "Wrap it up," she said, "and get me the matching ladies' version, the one with the mother-of-pearl face." Jared leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. "You are the best, babe." Brandon never knew how to spend money. He just hoarded it. "You know how to live." He was boring, Vanessa agreed. She held out her wrist for the manager to fasten the second watch. He was always talking about investment portfolios and compound interest. Who cares about the future when you can have this right now? I sat in my motel room and took a bite of a cold sandwich. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Vanessa thought she was spending Brandon's money. She thought she was draining the inheritance. She was wrong. When Arthur and I froze the main estate accounts, we left the credit cards active. But here was the legal technicality that Vanessa was too arrogant to understand. The primary cardholder was Brandon. When he died, the contract for that credit line effectively ended. However, because Vanessa was an authorized user on the account, any charges made after the date of death would be flagged by the bank's fraud algorithm eventually. But Arthur had pulled a few strings to override the immediate freeze, allowing the charges to go through for a few days. But the debt would not belong to the estate. The estate was in probate and protected by the trust. The debt for unauthorized spending after death would fall legally and squarely on the person who swiped the card. Vanessa was not spending an inheritance. She was racking up personal debt at an interest rate of 24%. Every time that chip reader beeped, she was tightening a noose around her own neck. I checked the total. In one afternoon, she had spent $80,000. That was more than the average American family earned in a year. Back in the store, Vanessa pulled out the black card. It was heavy, made of anodized titanium. She held it between two manicured fingers like a weapon. "Put it all on this," she said, tossing the card onto the velvet tray. "And add a $5,000 tip for yourself, Claude. You were adequately tolerant of us today." Claude took the card with a bow. "Certainly, Mrs. Vance." Jared was busy taking a selfie with his new watch, trying to get the lighting right to show off the diamonds. "Blessed," he muttered. "New life." The machine whirred. For a second, there was a pause. In that pause, I could imagine Vanessa's heart skipping a beat. Deep down beneath the layers of arrogance, she had to be terrified. She had to know on some level that she was a fraud. But then the machine beeped. Approved. Arthur had done his job. The limit had been lifted. The trap was baited. Vanessa let out a breath she did not know she was holding. She snatched the receipt without looking at it and shoved it into her purse. "Let's go, Jared," she said, standing up. "I am bored of this place. I want to go look at the penthouses downtown. If I am going to be a multimillionaire, I cannot be living in that old mansion forever. It smells like old people." As they walked out of the store, the sales associate Elena held the door open for them. Vanessa did not say thank you. She did not acknowledge the girl's existence. She simply walked out into the sunshine, believing she was the queen of the world. I watched the total on my screen update. $87,000 and counting. I put down my sandwich. I was no longer hungry. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction settling in my gut. "You think you are winning, Vanessa," I whispered to the empty motel room. "You think this is freedom. But you are just running up a tab at a restaurant where you can never pay the bill." My phone buzzed again. A text message from Arthur. It read simply, "The bait is taken. The fish is on the line. Shall we reel her in or let her run a little longer?" I typed back a single word. Run. I wanted her to run until she was exhausted. I wanted her to feel the wind in her hair and the sun on her face. Because when I finally yanked that line, she was going to hit the wall so hard, she would wish she had never been born. I lay back on the lumpy motel pillow and closed my eyes. I could hear the traffic outside, the sirens and the honking horns. It was the sound of the city, the sound of life moving on. But in my mind, all I could hear was the beep of that credit card machine. Beep, beep, beep. Every beep was a nail in her coffin. And I was the one holding the hammer. The next morning, I stood outside the wrought iron gates of St. Jude's Academy. It was a place of privilege where tuitions cost more than the average household income, and the driveway was a parade of Range Rovers and Teslas. I used to be part of that parade. I used to pull up in my vintage Jaguar and watch my grandson's face light up when he saw me. Now I stood in the shadow of an old elm tree across the street, wearing a faded windbreaker and a baseball cap pulled low over my eyes. I looked like a gardener, or perhaps a janitor on his break. Parents glanced at me with suspicion as they waited for the bell to ring. They clutched their designer bags a little tighter. They did not recognize the man who had donated the new science wing just 3 years ago. The bell rang, a piercing sound that cut through the humid afternoon air. The heavy oak doors of the school burst open, and a flood of children in navy blue blazers poured out. They were laughing, shouting, trading Pokemon cards, and complaining about homework. It was a sea of innocence and entitlement. I scanned the crowd, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was looking for one face. One small face that looked so much like Brandon, it sometimes made my breath catch in my throat. Then I saw him. Leo was walking alone. He was 10 years old, but today he looked smaller. His blazer seemed too big for him, as if he had shrunk inside it. He was not running or laughing. He was dragging his backpack, looking at his shoes, kicking a stray pebble along the pavement. He stopped at the edge of the pickup zone. He did not look for a car. He knew no one was coming for him. Vanessa had probably sent an Uber, or perhaps she had forgotten him entirely in her champagne-fueled haze. I checked left and right. The crossing guard was distracted. I stepped out from the shadows and whistled. It was a specific whistle, 2 short notes and 1 long. The call of a mourning dove. It was the signal I had taught Brandon when he was a boy, and then Brandon had taught it to Leo. Leo's head snapped up. He looked around wildly, his eyes wide. I whistled again, softer this time. He saw me. For a second, I was terrified he would not recognize me in these ragged clothes. I was terrified he would see a stranger instead of his grandfather. But then his face crumpled. He dropped his backpack right there on the sidewalk and ran. He did not care about the cars. He did not care about the rules. He bolted across the street, dodging a slow-moving sedan, and threw himself into my arms. "Grandpa," he sobbed, burying his face in my cheap jacket. "Grandpa, where did you go? Mom said you went away. She said you did not want to see us anymore." The rage that flared in my chest was so hot, it almost blinded me. That woman. That. It was not enough to steal my house and my money. She had to poison my grandson's heart, too. She had to paint me as the villain to cover her own cruelty. I knelt down on the pavement, ignoring the pain in my bad knee. I held him by the shoulders, looking deep into his tear-filled eyes. Leo, listen to me. I need you to listen very carefully. Your mother is lying. I did not leave you. I would never leave you. Do you hear me? Never. Then why aren't you home? He asked, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Why did Jared throw your stuff out? I saw him, Grandpa. I saw him laughing. I grit my teeth, forcing a smile I did not feel. We are playing a game, Leo. A very serious game. Think of it like a spy mission. Right now, I have to be undercover. I have to be invisible so I can fix things. But I need you to be my partner. Can you do that? Leo sniffed and nodded slowly. A spy mission. Yes, I said. But I need to know what is happening in the house. Is she treating you okay? Leo looked down at his shoes again. He scuffed the toe of his expensive loafer against the asphalt. She is always partying, Grandpa. There are people there every night. Loud music. And Jared yells at me if I come downstairs. He told me I am in the way. My hands tightened on his shoulders. I wanted to march up that hill and tear Jared apart with my bare hands. But I couldn't. Not yet. And last night, Leo whispered, his voice trembling. Last night, I heard them talking. Mom was on the phone with a school, a boarding school. My blood ran cold. Which school, Leo? I think it was called Blackwood. She said it is in Alabama. She said it is for boys who need discipline. She told Jared that she needs me out of the house so they can have their space. She said I remind her too much of Dad. The air left my lungs. Blackwood Military Academy. I knew it. It was a place for delinquents, a place where rich parents sent their mistakes to be broken and rebuilt by drill sergeants. It was a prison with tuition. She wanted to ship a grieving 10-year-old boy to a boot camp across the country just so she could play house with her muscle-bound boyfriend. This was it. This was the line. I had been willing to wait. I had been willing to let her spend herself into debt slowly. But now the timeline had changed. I could not leave Leo in that house for another week. I could not risk her signing those papers. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small velvet pouch I had prepared. Leo, look at me. I opened the pouch. Inside was a black digital watch. It looked like a standard fitness tracker, something a kid would wear. But it was not standard. It was military-grade technology, a prototype from one of my old security contracts. I fastened it around his small wrist. This is not just a watch, Leo, I said, my voice low and urgent. It is a lifeline. It has a GPS tracker that only I can see. And do you see this button here on the side? The red one. He nodded, his eyes wide with awe. If you ever feel scared, if they try to take you somewhere you do not want to go, if Jared touches you, you press this button and you hold it for 3 seconds. Do you understand? What does it do? He asked, touching the cold metal casing. It calls me, I said, and it tells me exactly where you are. And no matter where I am, no matter what I am doing, I will come for you. Nothing will stop me. Not locks, not gates, not police. I will come. Promise, he whispered. I promise, I said, pressing my forehead against his. On your father's soul, I promise. A horn honked loudly. I looked up. A sleek black limousine had pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and a driver I did not recognize yelled out. Leo Vance. Let's go, kid. Your mother is waiting. Leo jumped. He looked at the car, then back at me with panic in his eyes. Go, I said, giving him a gentle push. Don't let them see the watch. Pull your sleeve down. Remember the mission. You are my eyes on the inside. Be brave. Leo pulled his blazer sleeve down over the watch. He took a deep breath. He looked older suddenly. The grief was still there, but now there was something else. Determination. I love you, Grandpa, he said. I love you too, kid. Now run. He turned and ran toward the limousine. He climbed into the back seat without looking back. As the car pulled away, I saw his small hand press against the tinted glass. I stood there on the sidewalk watching the car disappear into the traffic. The rage was gone now, replaced by a cold, deadly clarity. Arthur was right to call it the Omega Protocol. It was the end. But for Vanessa, it was going to be the end of everything. I pulled out my burner phone. My hands were steady. Arthur, I said when he answered. Conrad. How is the boy? He is scared, I said. She is planning to send him to Blackwood. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. That place is a nightmare, Conrad. Change of plans, I said. We are not waiting for her to hit the credit limit. We are not waiting for the bank to flag the fraud. We are accelerating the timeline. What do you want to do? Arthur asked. Trigger the clause, I said. The morality clause in the trust. And call the private investigators. I want everything on Jared. I want to know if he has so much as an unpaid parking ticket. We are going to bury them, Arthur. And we are going to do it before she can sign those enrollment papers. Understood, Arthur said. I will start drafting the motions tonight. I hung up. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. I was just an old man in a windbreaker standing alone on a street corner. But inside I was a fortress. I was a weapon. Vanessa wanted to get rid of the past. She wanted to erase Brandon and me and Leo. She wanted a clean slate. Well, I was about to give her a slate so clean, she would be scrubbing floors for the rest of her life. I turned and walked toward the bus stop. The game was over. The war had begun. The notification light on my burner phone blinked, a single pulsating red eye in the darkness of the motel room. It was 8 in the evening. In the real world, people were eating dinner or putting their children to bed. But in the digital world, Vanessa was just waking up. I tapped the screen. The familiar interface of a live streaming platform loaded. The numbers in the corner skyrocketed instantly. 5,000 viewers. 10,000. 15,000. People love a tragedy, but they love a scandal even more. The video feed stabilized. There she was. Vanessa was sitting on the edge of the king-sized bed in the master suite. My master suite. The headboard behind her was hand-carved mahogany imported from Italy, a piece I had selected with Catherine 30 years ago. Now it served as the backdrop for a spectacle of narcissism. She was wearing white. It was a calculated choice. The grieving widow in angel's clothing. But the neckline was plunging, and her lips were painted a bright, aggressive red. A ring light reflected in her eyes, giving her a robotic, soulless gaze. "Hi, guys," she cooed, waving at the camera. Her voice was an octave higher than normal, a sickly sweet performance for the masses. "I just wanted to come on here and say thank you. Thank you for all the love and the support during this impossible time. Losing Brandon has been..." She paused. She looked down and dabbed at a dry eye with a tissue. She did not shed a tear. I knew she wouldn't. Vanessa did not waste hydration on sadness. It has been so hard, she continued, looking back up with practiced bravery. But I am trying to stay strong. For him. For his legacy. I took a sip of my cold coffee. Legacy. She dared to use that word. She did not know the meaning of it. To her, legacy was just a bank balance and a verified checkmark next to her name. But you know, she said, her voice hardening slightly, there are always people who want to tear you down when you are shining. There are always haters, and sadly, some of those haters are family. The comments section scrolled by in a blur of emojis. Broken hearts, praying hands, fire symbols. Stay strong, queen. Ignore them. You deserve everything. Vanessa reached out of the frame and pulled something into view. It was a thick envelope. I recognized the seal immediately. It was the preliminary injunction Arthur had sent over via courier that afternoon. It was a legal document ordering her to cease all asset liquidation and vacate the premises pending a probate hearing. "My father-in-law sent me this today," she said, holding the envelope up like a dead rat. "Can you believe it? Barely 3 days after we buried his son, and he is already trying to sue me. He wants to kick me out of my own house. He wants to leave me on the street." The comments exploded with outrage. "He is evil. What a monster. Don't let him win." Vanessa smiled a small, tight smile of satisfaction. She ran a manicured fingernail under the flap of the envelope. The sound of the tearing paper was crisp and loud on the microphone. "He thinks a piece of paper can stop me," she said. "He thinks he can bully me because he is a man and I am just a woman. But he forgot that I am a Vance now, and Vances do not back down." She pulled out the legal documents. They were thick, printed on heavy bond paper. I saw Arthur's signature at the bottom. It was a court order, a mandate from a judge. Ignoring it was risky. Destroying it publicly was suicide. But Vanessa did not care about laws. She only cared about likes. "This," she said, holding up the pages. "This is what I think of his threats." She ripped the papers in half. Then she ripped them again and again. She threw the confetti of torn legal documents into the air, letting them rain down over her like snow. She laughed. It was that same hyena laugh I had heard in the driveway, but now it was amplified for 20,000 people. "This is my house," she declared, staring directly into the lens. "This is my money. This is my empire. Brandon left it to me because he knew I was the only one strong enough to run it. The old generation is done. They are obsolete. It is my turn now." Jared walked into the frame. He was shirtless, wearing only a towel and the diamond watch they had bought yesterday. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, kissing her neck. "Tell them, babe," he grunted. "We are the kings and queens of this city." "Who is that?" the comments asked. "Is that the gardener?" "He is hot." Vanessa giggled, leaning back into him. "This is my emotional support," she said with a wink. "We are grieving together." I watched the screen, my face expressionless. Most men in my position would be screaming. They would be throwing the phone against the wall. They would be typing furious comments in the chat, trying to defend their honor. But I did not type a single word. I simply pressed the record button on my other device. I recorded every second of it. I recorded the ripping of the court summons. I recorded the declaration of ownership over assets she did not legally possess. I recorded the presence of her lover in the marital bed 3 days after the funeral. In the state of New York, destroying a court order is considered contempt. But declaring ownership of a company that belongs to a trust and then publicly stating you intend to liquidate it is something else entirely. It is evidence of intent to defraud. She was not just being rude. She was confessing. Arthur sent me a text at that exact moment. "Are you seeing this?" I typed back. "I am recording it. The judge is going to love her performance." On the screen, Vanessa was now holding up a bottle of champagne. The expensive vintage from my cellar. A bottle I had been saving for Leo's 21st birthday. To the future, she toasted clinking glasses with Jared. To $80 million. And to getting rid of the dead weight. She took a long swallow. I zoomed in on the image. Behind her on the nightstand, I saw something that made my blood freeze for a second, before boiling over. It was Brandon's urn, the urn containing his ashes. She had placed it next to an ashtray. She was using the lid of the urn to hold her car keys. The disrespect was absolute. It was total. It was a desecration so profound that it transcended anger and became a cold, hard resolve. "Enjoy the champagne, Vanessa," I whispered to the screen. "Drink every drop, because it is the last taste of luxury you will ever have." I stopped the recording. I saved the file. I uploaded it to the secure cloud server where Arthur was building the case. The live stream was still going. She was now giving a tour of her closet, showing off the new bags she had bought with the credit card. She was spinning around, asking her followers which one she should wear to the club tonight. I turned off the phone. The room went dark again. She had called me dead weight. She had called me obsolete. She thought because I was old, I was weak. She thought because I was silent, I was defeated. But she forgot one thing. The old generation built the world she was living in. We poured the foundation. We wired the electricity. We wrote the laws. And we knew where the kill switch was. I lay down on the hard motel bed. I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. Tomorrow, the bank accounts would start to dry up. Tomorrow, the utilities would be cut. Tomorrow, the reality of the world would crash into her fantasy. But tonight, I let her have her moment. I let her play queen in a castle made of sand. Because the tide was coming in, and I was the ocean. The marble floors of the First Sovereign Bank were polished to such a high sheen that they reflected the faces of the people walking on them. Usually those faces were calm, composed, and radiated the quiet confidence of old money. But today, the reflection was distorted by a mask of pure, unadulterated greed. I sat in my motel room watching the security feed on my laptop. I had access to the bank's internal cameras, not because I was a hacker, but because I had built that bank. 30 years ago, I sat on the board of directors. I approved the loan for the very building Vanessa was currently storming into. She wore huge sunglasses indoors, a cliché of the rich and famous that she had adopted with embarrassing enthusiasm. Jared trailed behind her wearing a tank top that exposed his tribal tattoos. In a hushed sanctuary of high finance where suits cost more than cars, he looked like a bouncer who had gotten lost on his way to the gym. They bypassed the line of regular customers. Of course they did. Vanessa marched straight to the glass-walled office at the back. The plaque on the door read Senior Director of Private Wealth. Inside, sitting behind a desk made of reclaimed walnut, was Mr. Sterling. Sterling was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He was also the godfather of my late son, Brandon. He had held Brandon at his christening. He had cried at his funeral, and now he was about to act in the greatest performance of his life. Vanessa threw her purse onto Sterling's desk, knocking over a small framed photo of his grandchildren. She did not apologize. "I want $5 million, she announced, in cash, or a cashier's check. I do not care. Just make it happen. I am buying a yacht this afternoon, and the broker does not take American Express." Sterling slowly picked up the photo frame. He dusted it off with his thumb and placed it back in its precise position. Then he folded his hands on the desk and looked at her over the rim of his spectacles. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice as dry as parchment. "I offer my condolences again on your loss. It has only been 3 days." Yeah, thanks." Vanessa waved her hand, dismissing his sympathy like a bad waiter. "We are grieving in our own way. Retail therapy, you know. Now about the money. The Sea Ray 650 is waiting. Jared here needs to be on the water by sunset." Jared leaned against the doorframe, flexing his biceps. "It is for her mental health, man. The ocean heals." Sterling tapped a few keys on his computer. He frowned. "Mrs. Vance, I am afraid a withdrawal of that magnitude is impossible at this moment." Vanessa's jaw dropped. The veins in her neck bulged. "What do you mean, impossible? My husband had $80 million in this bank. I saw the statements. I am his wife. It is my money." Sterling turned the monitor slightly so she could not see it. He was not looking at a bank account. He was looking at a solitaire game. But he played the part perfectly. The assets are currently undergoing a probate audit, he explained calmly. As you know, when a primary account holder passes away, the federal government requires a temporary freeze to assess estate taxes and potential liens. The $80 million is there. Mrs. Vance, but it is locked in the vault, so to speak. It could take months to unseal. Months, Vanessa shrieked. Her voice cracked, echoing through the quiet bank lobby outside. I cannot wait months. I am a Vance. I have a lifestyle to maintain. Do you know who I am? I will have your job. I will move every cent to the Cayman Islands. I watched closely. This was the pivot point. If Sterling pushed too hard, she might actually call a lawyer, a real one, not the strip mall ambulance chaser she usually used. She needed to feel like she was winning while she was actually losing. Sterling sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, feigning defeat. Please lower your voice, Mrs. Vance. We value your patronage. Perhaps there is a workaround. Vanessa stopped screaming. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of workaround? Sterling reached into his drawer and pulled out a thick document bound in blue leather. Since you are a valued client and the widow of a significant depositor, we can offer you a private client bridge loan. Essentially, we open a temporary line of credit for you. It allows you to spend against the future value of the inheritance. Vanessa's eyes lit up. So I can get the boat. Yes, Sterling said, sliding the document across the desk. You can access up to $10 million immediately. However, because the main estate is frozen, this credit line must be opened in your name personally. It is a formality, really. Just a way for the bank to ensure the loan until the probate court releases the main funds. Once the estate clears, the bank will automatically pay off this loan with Brandon's money. He lied so smoothly, I almost applauded. The truth was legally terrifying. By signing that document, Vanessa was not borrowing against the estate. The estate was in an irrevocable trust that she had no claim to. She was taking out a personal loan, a loan with a variable interest rate of 18%. And since the estate would never pay it off, because she was not the beneficiary, she would be personally liable for every single penny. She was not buying a yacht with Brandon's money. She was buying a $5 million anchor to tie around her own neck. Where do I sign? She asked, grabbing a gold pen from the holder. Jared leaned over her shoulder, whispering in her ear. Ask for more, babe. Ask for 10. We could get the helicopter, too. Vanessa giggled. You are bad. I love it. Mr. Sterling, make it 10 million, just in case. Sterling nodded solemnly. As you wish. He printed a new page. He highlighted a paragraph at the bottom. A paragraph that clearly stated in fine print, asterisk, the signatory acknowledges full personal liability for all debts incurred and waives any right to claim against the primary estate if probate rules against the borrower. It was a death sentence in legalese. Read this section carefully, please, Sterling said, knowing full well she wouldn't. Vanessa barely glanced at it. She was too busy thinking about the champagne she would pop on the deck of her new toy. She scrawled her signature with a flourish. Vanessa Vance, she said proudly. The new matriarch. Sterling took the document back. He stamped it. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper was loud. Thump. To me, it sounded like the gavel of a judge pronouncing a guilty verdict. He handed her a black titanium card. Here is your access key, Mrs. Vance. This card has a $10 million limit. It is active immediately. Vanessa snatched the card and kissed it. You see, she said, turning to Jared. I told you I know how to handle these old suits. You just have to be firm. Jared grinned and high-fived her. You are a genius, babe. A total boss. They stood up to leave. Vanessa did not thank Sterling. She simply turned her back on him. by the way she called out over her shoulder. I want the air conditioning in the lobby turned down. It is freezing in here. If I am paying your salary, I expect comfort. We will attend to it immediately, Mrs. Vance Sterling said. As they walked out the glass doors, I saw Vanessa holding the card up to the light, admiring the way it shone. She looked like a child who had found a loaded gun and thought it was a toy. Inside the office, Sterling waited until they were completely out of sight. Then he looked directly into the security camera hidden in the smoke detector. He winked. I sat back in my chair and let out a long breath. My heart was pounding not with fear, but with adrenaline. She had done it. She had just signed away her future. If she had simply read the will. If she had simply treated me with a shred of human decency. If she had just waited. She might have walked away with a comfortable settlement. I would have taken care of her despite everything because she was Brandon's wife. But greed is a blinder. It narrows your vision until all you can see is what you want, and you become blind to the cliff you are walking toward. I picked up my phone and texted Sterling. Well played, old friend. Initiate Phase 3. Phase 3 was the physical dismantling. She had the debt. Now she needed to lose the comfort. I looked at the time. It was 4 p.m. The yacht broker would take her money. She would sign the contract for the boat. She would probably take it out for a sunset cruise. But when she came back to the mansion tonight, she would find that the world was a very different place. I stood up and walked to the window of the motel. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry orange. Enjoy the sunset. Vanessa, I said softly, because tomorrow the storm hits. I packed my laptop. I needed to move. I needed to be closer to the house for the next part. I wanted to see the lights go out. Literally. Because when you owe the bank $10 million and you have no income and no assets, the bank stops being your friend very quickly. And when the power company realizes that the owner of the house is dead and the bills are unpaid, they do not care about your social media following. The trap was set. The mouse had taken the cheese, and the snap was going to be deafening. From my vantage point, parked in a rented sedan 3 blocks away, the mansion looked like a cruise ship anchored in a sea of darkness. Every light was blazing. The chandeliers in the foyer were on. The landscape lighting was washing the manicured hedges in a golden glow. Even the pool lights were illuminating the backyard in an artificial turquoise. Vanessa and Jared had returned from their yacht purchase an hour ago. I could hear the bass of the music thumping through the closed windows. They were celebrating. They were drinking my wine, sitting on my furniture, and toasting to a life they had not earned. I looked at my watch. It was 12:14 in the morning. I had called the power company 3 hours ago. I had spoken to a supervisor named Brenda, who had worked with my company for 20 years. I explained that the account holder, Brandon Vance, was deceased. I explained that the property was currently unoccupied as far as the legal owners were concerned. I requested an immediate disconnect of services to prevent unauthorized usage. Brenda had hesitated, but the paperwork was in order. The death certificate was on file. And strictly speaking, supplying power to a dead man is against policy. 12:15. It happened instantly. 1 second, the house was a beacon of arrogance. The next, it was a black hole. The music died mid-beat. The security floods vanished. The house was plunged into a darkness so total it looked like it had been erased from the earth. I rolled down my window. The silence that followed was heavy. Then came the screaming. It was Vanessa. She was not screaming in fear. She was screaming in rage. "Jared, fix it!" she shrieked, her voice carrying over the quiet neighborhood. I picked up my long-range listening device, a remnant from my days overseeing shipping yards where theft was common. I pointed the parabolic microphone at the master bedroom window, which was now thrown open, presumably to let in air, as the central cooling system had just died. "I cannot fix it, babe," Jared's voice whined. He sounded like a petulant child. I don't know where the fuse box is. Use your flashlight. I saw the beam of a cell phone flashlight jerking frantically around the room. This is ridiculous, Vanessa hissed. The breaker must have tripped. We have too many things plugged in. Go down to the basement and flip the switch. You go down there, Jared shot back. It is dark. There could be rats. I smiled in the darkness of my car. My son Brandon would have walked through fire to fix a problem for his wife. Jared would not even walk down a flight of stairs. I listened as they stumbled through the house, knocking over furniture. I heard the crash of a vase. Oops, Jared muttered. That was a Ming vase, you idiot, Vanessa screamed. Do you know how much that cost? Who cares, you are rich. Buy another one, Jared retorted. His tone had changed. The admiration was gone, replaced by annoyance. The heat was already building up in the house. The humidity of the summer night was creeping in, and without the hum of the air conditioner, the reality of their situation was becoming sticky and uncomfortable. They finally found the breaker box in the utility room. I heard the clacking of switches being flipped up and down. Nothing happened. It is not the breaker, Vanessa said, breathless from the exertion. The meter is dead. The whole feed is cut. She pulled out her phone. I could hear her tapping furiously. She was calling the power company's emergency line. I waited. This was the moment of truth. Yes, hello, Vanessa barked into the phone. I am reporting an outage at 450 Ocean View Drive. My power just went out. Fix it. Now. There was a pause. I could imagine the operator on the other end checking the screen. What do you mean the account is closed? Vanessa shouted. That is impossible. The bill is on autopay. My husband set it up. Another pause. Yes, I know he is dead. But I am his wife. I am living here. Turn it back on. I leaned closer to the speaker. Excuse me, Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. What did you just say? Who is the owner? She went silent for a long time. Then she said a name that I knew very well. Vance Holdings. LLC. What is Vance Holdings LLC? She demanded. This is Brandon's house. It is our house. I don't care about some company. I want my lights on. She listened for another minute. Then she hung up and threw the phone against the wall. I heard it bounce. They said they cannot reconnect it without the authorization of the LLC manager, she told Jared. Her voice was trembling. They said I am an unauthorized squatter. Squatter. Jared laughed nervously. Babe, that is not funny. It is 90 degrees in here. I am sweating. Shut up, Jared, Vanessa snapped. Let me think. She scrambled for her phone again, checking to see if it was broken. She dialed another number. It was late, but desperation does not keep office hours. Barry, pick up, she muttered. Barry was her lawyer. He was a man who advertised on the back of bus stop benches. He was cheap, and he was about to prove that you get what you pay for. Hello, Barry, Vanessa said, her voice pitching up into hysteria. It is me, Vanessa. You have to help me. The power is out. They said the house belongs to a company called Vance Holdings. What does that mean? You told me the house was mine. I could not hear Barry's side of the conversation clearly, but I could infer it from Vanessa's reactions. Yes, I know Brandon bought it, she argued. But they are saying this company owns the deed. Is that bad? She paced back and forth, the flashlight beam dancing wildly on the ceiling. Well, fix it, she screamed. Sue them. I don't care if it takes a week. I need power tonight. My food is going to spoil. My caviar is in that fridge, Barry. She stopped pacing. She listened intently. Wait, she said slowly. If the house is owned by an LLC, then do I own the LLC? Barry must have given her the answer she did not want to hear. The manager, she whispered. Who is the manager? She went quiet. The silence stretched out. "Oh," she said. It was a small sound, a sound of a balloon deflating. She hung up the phone without saying goodbye. "What did he say?" Jared asked. He was sitting on the stairs, shining his light on his own face, checking for sweat. He said, Vanessa started, her voice hollow. He said that rich people often put houses in companies to avoid taxes. He said that usually the wife inherits the company. Usually, Jared said. So what is the problem? The problem, Vanessa said, is that he cannot find the paperwork for the company. He said if Brandon did not list me as a member of the LLC, then I don't own the company. And if I don't own the company, I don't own the house. Jared stood up. Whoa, wait a minute. You told me this was a done deal. You told me we were set for life. I just quit my job at the gym, Vanessa. I told my boss to go to hell because I was going to be a millionaire. You are still going to be a millionaire, Vanessa insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. It is just a mix-up. I have the $10 million credit line. We can just go to a hotel. A hotel, Jared scoffed. We have a yacht, Vanessa. Or at least we paid for one. Why are we sitting here in the dark like losers? Because I cannot find my car keys in the dark, Vanessa screamed. And the electric gate won't open without power, you idiot. We are trapped. Trapped. That was the word I was waiting for. They were trapped in a 10,000 square foot mansion that was rapidly becoming a sauna. The beautiful floor-to-ceiling windows that offered stunning ocean views were now just magnifying glasses heating up the interior. The expensive refrigerator was slowly warming up, turning gourmet food into garbage. The smart toilets wouldn't flush. The security system was offline, leaving them feeling exposed. I am going to sleep by the pool, Jared announced. I cannot deal with this. You better fix this by tomorrow, Vanessa. This is not what I signed up for. I heard his heavy footsteps stomping away. Vanessa was left alone in the dark foyer. I heard her slide down the wall until she hit the floor. I heard the soft sound of sobbing. It was not the sobbing of grief. It was the sobbing of a child who had broken a toy and realized it couldn't be glued back together. It is my house, she whispered to the darkness. It is mine. I turned the key in the ignition of my rental car. The engine purred to life. No, Vanessa, I said softly as I put the car in gear. It is just a building. It was a home when my wife was alive. It was a home when Brandon was alive. Now it is just a pile of bricks owned by a corporation. And you are just a visitor who overstayed her welcome. I drove away, leaving the mansion in total blackness. The physical trap was sprung. She was uncomfortable. She was scared. She was beginning to doubt her own reality. But the real blow was yet to come. Tomorrow she would wake up in a hot house with no coffee, no shower, and a boyfriend who was already looking for the exit. And then she would have to face the lawyers. I felt a pang of sadness for the house. I had built it with love. But sometimes you have to burn the field to kill the weeds. I headed back to the motel. I needed rest. Tomorrow was the day we revealed the will. Tomorrow was the day the floor would drop out from under her completely. As I drove, I thought about the $10 million loan she had signed. She had traded her future for a boat she couldn't even get to. Greed is not just a sin. It is a mathematical error. And Vanessa was about to learn that you cannot divide by zero. The morning sun was brutal. It beat down on the pavement of the Marina District, baking the asphalt, until the air shimmered with heat. I sat in the corner of the Emerald Cafe, a bistro frequented by the very people I used to do business with. It is the kind of place where a cup of coffee costs $12 and the customers wear sunglasses indoors to hide their hangovers or their insecurities. I was wearing a gray maintenance uniform I had purchased at a thrift store. I had a mop bucket next to me and a wet floor sign propped against the table. To the wealthy elite of this city, a man in a uniform is not a person. He is furniture. He is an obstacle to step around. He is invisible. I was counting on that invisibility. At 9:15, the glass doors swung open. Vanessa and Jared stumbled in. They looked like refugees from a fashion show that had been hit by a hurricane. Vanessa's hair, usually a sculpted helmet of perfection, was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore no makeup, and without the layers of foundation and contour, her face looked pale and pinched. She was wearing oversized sweatpants and a tank top. Jared looked even worse. His designer t-shirt was stained with sweat, and his eyes were bloodshot. A night without air conditioning in a sealed mansion had taken its toll. They collapsed into a booth 3 tables away from me. The smell of expensive perfume could not quite mask the scent of stale sweat and desperation. 2 large iced coffees, Vanessa barked at the waitress without looking at her. And turn the air conditioning up. I am dying. I dipped my rag into the bucket and slowly wiped the table next to me. I was close enough to hear every breath they took. "This is insane," Jared hissed, leaning across the table. "I did not sleep a wink, Vanessa. It was 100 degrees in that house. And the toilet. The toilet won't flush. It is disgusting." "Stop whining," Vanessa snapped, rubbing her temples. "I am working on it. Barry says if we can just get the deed transfers, we can sell the house as is. We don't need the power on to sell it. We just need a buyer who pays cash." "Cash," Jared said, his eyes lighting up. "How much cash?" 20 million maybe, Vanessa said. "Even with a quick sale discount, we walk away with 20 million, plus the 80 in the trust once the probate clears. We just need to survive a few days." I scrubbed a spot on the table harder. Surviving a few days, that was their plan. They thought this was a temporary inconvenience. They thought they were just enduring a rough patch before the golden parachute deployed. They had no idea the parachute had already been cut. Jared pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked. "The yacht broker keeps calling me," he said. "He wants the rest of the deposit. He says if we don't wire the funds by noon, he is going to release the hold on the boat." "Tell him to wait," Vanessa said, grabbing her iced coffee as soon as the waitress put it down. She drank half of it in one gulp. "Tell him the bank is having technical difficulties. Use the credit card I gave you to book a hotel suite for tonight." "The Ritz. I need a shower and room service." "I tried," Jared said. The card was declined. Vanessa froze. The straw fell from her lips. "What do you mean declined? The limit is $10 million. "I don't know." Jared shrugged. The receptionist said, "Card not authorized. Maybe you triggered a fraud alert buying all those bags." Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. "Useless. Everything is useless. Give me the phone. I will call the bank." She dialed. She waited. I watched the color drain from her face as she listened to the automated message. "The account has been suspended for security review," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "They froze the credit line." I stopped wiping the table. I stood perfectly still. This was the moment of entropy. The moment when the system begins to collapse into chaos. "What do we do now?" Jared asked. His voice was rising in panic. "We have no house. We have no cash. We have no cards. Vanessa, I have payments due on my truck." "Shut up, let me think," Vanessa hissed. She looked around the cafe, her eyes wild and frantic. She was looking for a solution, but all she saw were strangers sipping lattes. Her eyes swept over me. For a second, our gazes locked. I held my breath. I was her father-in-law. I had lived in the same house with her for 5 years. Surely she would recognize the eyes of the man she had betrayed. But she didn't. She looked right through me. To her, I was just an old janitor with a bucket. I was part of the scenery. Her narcissism was so absolute that it blinded her to reality. She could only see people who could give her something, or people who could take something away. She did not think an old man in a gray uniform could do either. She looked away. "We go to the lawyer," she decided, standing up abruptly. "We go to Barry's office and we make him file an emergency motion. We forced the bank to unlock the funds. We are Vance's, damn it. We don't get declined. She threw a crumpled $10 bill onto the table for the coffees. It was probably the last piece of physical cash she had in her purse. "Let's go," she commanded. Jared followed her, grabbing a croissant from the display case on his way out, without paying. I watched them leave. I watched them climb into Brandon's Porsche, which was parked illegally in a handicap spot outside. As soon as the engine roared to life, I reached into the pocket of my uniform and pulled out my phone. I dialed Arthur Fairbanks. He answered on the first ring. "Report," he said. "They are breaking Conrad," I said calmly. "The credit line is dead. The house is uninhabitable. They are desperate. She is heading to her lawyer to try and force a sale." "Perfect," Arthur said. "She is playing right into the timeline." I walked over to their table. I picked up the crumpled $10 bill. I smoothed it out on the table. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. "It is time, Arthur," I said. "Call her. Tell her we are ready to read the will. Tell her we found a codicil. Tell her whatever you need to tell her to get her into your conference room at 2 o'clock. And Conrad, Arthur asked, "Should I have security on standby?" "No," I said. "I want her to feel safe. I want her to think she has won. When she walks into that room, let her believe she is about to be crowned queen." I hung up the phone. I picked up my bucket. I walked out of the cafe and into the heat. The sun felt good on my face. It felt like a spotlight clearing the stage for the final act. Vanessa wanted to be a Vance. She wanted the power and the prestige. But she forgot that the Vance motto was not about spending money. It was about earning it. And she was about to earn exactly what she deserved. I walked to my rental car and opened the trunk. Inside, hanging in a plastic garment bag, was my best suit. The charcoal gray Italian wool. The suit I wore to board meetings. The suit I wore when I acquired companies and dismantled competitors. I stripped off the janitor's uniform right there in the parking lot. I put on the white crisp shirt. I tied the silk tie. I slipped into the jacket. The old man who scrubbed tables was gone. Conrad Vance, the CEO, was back. I checked my reflection in the side mirror. My eyes were cold. My jaw was set. "I am coming for you, Vanessa," I whispered. I got into the car and drove toward the financial district. The trap was open. The bait was set. And the wolf was at the door. The air conditioning in the waiting room of Fairbanks and Associates was set to a crisp 65 degrees. It was the kind of artificial cold that smelled of money and old leather. I sat in the corner chair furthest from the receptionist's desk, wearing the same mud-stained flannel shirt and khaki pants I had worn the night I was evicted. I had deliberately chosen not to wear the suit I had prepared in the car. I wanted her to see the old man. I wanted her to see the victim one last time. I wanted her to look at me and see nothing but a broken retiree begging for scraps, because that would make her fall so much harder. The elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged softly. It was a polite sound, but what stepped out was anything but polite. Vanessa stormed into the lobby. She was trying to project power, but the cracks were showing. Her hair was pulled back too tight, pulling at the skin around her eyes, giving her a manic, desperate look. She was wearing a designer dress, but I noticed a small stain on the hem and wrinkles that suggested she had slept in it. Jared trailed behind her, carrying her purse like a servant. He looked exhausted. The lack of sleep and the stress of the frozen bank accounts had drained the arrogance right out of him. He was no longer the strutting peacock who had crushed my wife's picture. He was just a tired young man realizing he was in over his head. Vanessa marched up to the receptionist. "I am here to see Arthur Fairbanks," she announced loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "I have an appointment, and tell him to have the check ready. I am on a tight schedule." The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who had known me for 20 years, barely glanced up. Mr. Fairbanks is waiting in conference room B, she said coolly. Please go right in. Vanessa turned, and that was when she saw me. She stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes narrowed and her lip curled in a sneer of pure disgust. It was the look one might give to a cockroach found in a salad. "Oh, God," she groaned, rolling her eyes. "Why is he here? Did he follow us?" She walked over to me, stopping just close enough for me to smell the stale champagne on her breath. "I told you to stay away, Conrad," she hissed. "What are you doing here? Are you here to beg? Because I am telling you right now, I am not giving you a cent. Not for a hotel, not for food. You are on your own." I looked up at her, blinking slowly. I kept my hand folded in my lap to hide the fact that they were fists. "I was invited, Vanessa," I said softly. "Arthur said I needed to be here for the reading." "The reading," she laughed. A harsh barking sound. "There is nothing to read, old man. Brandon left everything to me. You are just here to waste my time." She turned to Jared. "Look at him. He looks homeless. It is embarrassing. Imagine if my friends saw me with him." Jared shifted uncomfortably. He looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. Or maybe it was just fear. "Let's just get this over with, Vanessa," he muttered. "I want to get the money and get out of here. This place gives me the creeps." Vanessa scoffed. "You are so soft. Fine. Let's go in and crush his dreams so we can go buy that yacht." She spun around and marched toward the heavy double doors of the conference room. I stood up slowly, feigning a stiffness in my joints. I followed them, keeping my head down, playing the part of the defeated father to perfection. Inside the conference room, Arthur Fairbanks sat at the head of a long mahogany table. Behind him, the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, the very city I had helped build. Arthur was wearing a three-piece navy suit. He looked every inch the shark that he was. On the table in front of him sat a single thick file folder and a pitcher of ice water. Vanessa did not wait to be seated. She pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table, the position of opposition, and threw herself into it. Jared sat next to her, fidgeting with his new diamond watch. I took the chair on the side midway between them and Arthur. I made myself small, hunched over my elbows on the table. "All right, let's make this quick," Vanessa said, drumming her fingernails on the polished wood. "I know the drill. You read some legal mumbo-jumbo. I sign some papers, and then you release the funds. My credit cards are frozen. Arthur and I am not happy about it. I expect that fixed within the hour." Arthur did not speak immediately. He took a sip of water. He adjusted his cufflinks. He looked at Vanessa with a gaze that was clinically detached. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Vance Arthur," said his voice smooth and deep. "I trust you are finding the accommodations at the estate comfortable." Vanessa flinched. She knew he knew. "The power is out," she snapped. "Some clerical error. That is why I need the money now. I need to fire the incompetent power company and hire a private generator service. Just give me the check." Arthur smiled. It was a thin, razor-sharp smile. "We will get to the disbursement of funds in a moment," he said. "But first, as per state law and the bylaws of the Vance Family Trust, we must formally read the last will and testament of Brandon Vance as well as the governing statutes of the estate." He opened the folder. Vanessa sighed loudly, throwing her head back. "Oh my God, this is torture. Just read it. Skip to the part where I get the 80 million. I watched her. I memorized this moment. The way she sat there, so entitled, so sure of her victory. She really believed that the world worked this way. She believed that because she was beautiful and loud, she deserved to own the earth. She did not look at me. Not once. To her, I was just a spectator at her coronation. Arthur cleared his throat. He began to read. "I, Brandon Vance, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils." Vanessa yawned. She actually yawned. Arthur continued, his eyes flicking up to meet mine for a brief second. Regarding my residential property located at 450 Ocean View Drive and my liquid assets held in the primary accounts. Here we go, Vanessa whispered to Jared, nudging him. Payday, baby. Arthur paused. He turned the page. The sound of the paper turning was the only sound in the room. I hereby acknowledge that said asset sets are not my personal property, but are the sole property of Vance Holdings LLC and the Vance Family Trust, of which I am merely a beneficiary with limited rights. Vanessa stopped drumming her fingers. She frowned. Wait, she said. What does that mean? Limited rights. Arthur held up a hand, silencing her. Please, Mrs. Vance, let me finish. He looked back at the document. Upon my death, my status as beneficiary is terminated immediately. All assets, rights, and privileges associated with the trust and the LLC shall revert to the control of the original grantor and trustee. Vanessa stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. What the hell are you talking about? She demanded, her voice rising to a shriek. Who is the grantor? Brandon was the owner. He told me he was the owner. Arthur closed the folder slowly. He clasped his hands on top of it. Brandon was a generous man, Arthur said, but he was not a foolish one. And neither was his father, who set up the trust 15 years ago to ensure that the family fortune would never fall into unworthy hands. Vanessa's face went white. She looked from Arthur to the empty chair at the head of the table, as if expecting Brandon to appear and explain. Then who, she whispered. Who is the grantor? Who owns my house? Arthur did not answer her. Instead, he turned his head slowly and looked directly at me. For the first time since we entered the room, Vanessa looked at me too, but she still didn't see it. She still saw the old man in the flannel shirt. Why are you looking at him? She spat, pointing a shaking finger at me. He is a nobody. He is a broke old man. Arthur leaned back in his chair. Actually, Mrs. Vance, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. You are currently sitting in his chair. I slowly straightened my back. The hunch disappeared. The frailty vanished. I lifted my chin and looked her dead in the eye. The transformation was subtle but immediate. I was no longer the grieving father. I was the chairman. Hello, Vanessa, I said. My voice was no longer soft. It was the voice that had commanded boardrooms and negotiated mergers. I think you are sitting in my seat. Vanessa laughed. It was a sound that bounced off the mahogany walls of the conference room, brittle and full of disbelief. She looked at me sitting there in my stained flannel shirt, and she looked at Arthur in his three-piece suit, and she shook her head as if we were telling a bad joke. You are insane, she said, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. You are actually senile. I am sitting in your chair. Conrad, look at you. You look like you just crawled out of a storm drain. You do not own a chair in this office. You probably do not even own the shoes on your feet. She turned to Arthur, her expression hardening. Enough of this theater, Arthur. I know you and Conrad are old friends. I know you want to protect his feelings. But business is business. Brandon is dead. I am his wife. The law is clear. Spouses inherit everything. Now stop letting this old man fantasize and cut the check. Arthur did not blink. He did not look at her with anger. He looked at her with pity. It was the kind of pity a butcher feels for a cow that does not know it is already in the slaughterhouse. Mrs. Vance, Arthur said, his voice calm and terrifyingly steady. You are referring to the laws of intestacy. Those laws apply when a person dies without a will or without an estate plan. But as I tried to explain, Brandon did not die without a plan. He died part of a system designed specifically to prevent exactly what you are trying to do. He slid the thick document across the table. It spun slowly on the polished wood, coming to a stop directly in front of her. The title page was embossed in gold. The Vance Family Irrevocable Trust. Vanessa looked at it without touching it. "What is this?" she demanded. "It is the reason you are not a millionaire," Arthur said. He opened a second folder. "Let me explain the structure to you in terms you can understand." Arthur continued. 15 years ago, long before Brandon met you, Conrad Vance created this trust. He transferred the ownership of his company, his patent portfolio, and his real estate holdings into it. So what? Vanessa snapped. "Brandon was the beneficiary. He told me. He said he lived off the trust." Arthur nodded. "Correct. Brandon was a beneficiary, not the owner. There is a massive legal difference, Mrs. Vance. Think of the trust as a water tank. Brandon was allowed to drink from the tap. He received a monthly allowance. He had use of the house. He had use of the cars. But he did not own the tank. He did not own the water. He just had permission to sip from it." Jared leaned forward, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Wait," Jared said. "So who owns the tank?" Arthur pointed a manicured finger at me. "The grantor owns the tank," he said. "And upon the death of a beneficiary, the permission to drink from the tap expires immediately. It does not pass to the widow. It does not pass to the girlfriend. It reverts entirely to the control of the grantor." Vanessa grabbed the document. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning frantically for a loophole, for a number, for anything that looked like a dollar sign. "This is a lie," she screamed. "This is a forgery. Brandon told me he was worth $80 million. He showed me the statements." Arthur reached into his briefcase and pulled out a bank statement. "He showed you this statement," Arthur said. "Look closely at the account name, Mrs. Vance." Vanessa snatched it. She read the top line. "Vance Family Trust, FBO Brandon Vance." FBO, Arthur repeated. "It stands for benefit of. It means the money was held for him, but it was never his. He could not spend the principal. He could not give it away. And he certainly could not leave it to his wife in a will. You cannot give away what you do not own." Vanessa dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to my muddy boots. She looked at me. The arrogance was beginning to crack. The reality was starting to seep in like cold water into a sinking ship. "But the house," she whispered. "The house is real. We lived there. We renovated the kitchen. I picked out the curtains." Arthur turned to page 42 of the document. "The property at 450 Ocean View Drive is owned by Vance Holdings, LLC." Arthur read. Brandon Vance was listed as the managing tenant. He had a lease agreement. A lifetime lease. He paused for effect. "The term of the lease is defined as the natural life of the tenant," Arthur said. When Brandon's heart stopped beating, the lease ended. "Technically, Mrs. Vance, from the moment of his death, you have been trespassing on corporate property." "Trespassing," Vanessa choked out. "Correct," Arthur said. "And since you are not an employee of Vance Holdings, and you are not a member of the trust, you have no right to reside there. The company has the right to evict you immediately, which is why the power was cut. The company does not pay utilities for squatters." The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Vanessa sat back in her chair. She looked like she had been punched in the stomach. She looked at Jared, hoping for him to fix it, to say something to beat up the lawyer. But Jared was staring at the table, his face pale. He was doing the math. No house, no 80 million, and a $10 million debt on a credit card. "So I get nothing," Vanessa whispered. Her voice was small, broken. 5 years. I gave him 5 years of my life. I put up with his boring stories. I put up with his family. And I get nothing. Arthur adjusted his glasses. Well, not exactly nothing, he said. Vanessa's head snapped up. Hope flared in her eyes. A desperate, hungry hope. There is a clause, Arthur said. Clause 12, Section C. The spousal support stipulation. I saw her shoulders relax. I saw the greed return instantly. I knew it, she breathed. I knew Brandon wouldn't leave me high and dry. How much is it? 5 million. 10. Arthur looked at me. I nodded. It was a subtle nod, but it was the signal to deliver the final insult. Arthur read from the page. In the event of my death, the trust shall provide a one-time payment to my surviving spouse to ensure she is not left destitute. This payment is calculated based on the average monthly income of a domestic worker in the state of New York multiplied by 3 months. Vanessa blinked. What? It comes to approximately $9,000, Arthur said. $9,000, Vanessa screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair over. 9,000. That won't even cover the champagne I bought for the funeral. This is a joke. This is sick. It is a standard severance package, Arthur said coldly. Brandon always said you treated the marriage like a job. So we are treating the end of it like a layoff. Vanessa lunged across the table. She grabbed the pitcher of ice water and threw it. She was aiming for Arthur, but in her blind rage, she missed. The pitcher shattered against the wall behind him, sending shards of glass and ice skittering across the floor. You will not get away with this, she shrieked. Her face was purple. Her veins were bulging. I will hire real lawyers. I will sue you for fraud. I will sue you for emotional distress. I will take this to the Supreme Court. Everyone knows that money was Brandon's. The world saw how we lived. A judge will see through this shell company nonsense. I decided it was time to speak. I slowly stood up. I did not stand up like an old man with a bad hip. I stood up straight. I buttoned the top button of my flannel shirt. I looked at her with the cold, hard eyes of a man who had negotiated with unions and cartels and politicians. Sit down, Vanessa, I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried an authority that made the air in the room feel heavier. She looked at me, startled. She had forgotten I was there. You sit down, she spat. You are a broke old loser. You don't tell me what to do. I walked around the table. I walked slowly, deliberately. The sound of my heavy boots on the floor was rhythmic like a ticking clock. I stopped in front of her. I was taller than her. I looked down at her. You seem to be confused about who I am, I said. You see the clothes. You see the mud. You see what you want to see. You think I am a victim because that makes you feel powerful. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a black handkerchief and wiped a smudge of dirt from my hand. But you forgot one thing, Vanessa. Who taught Brandon how to make money? Who built the company that generated the $80 million you feel entitled to? Who bought the land that the house sits on? I took a step closer. She took a step back, hitting the edge of the table. It was me, I said. I am the grantor. I am the trustee. I am the CEO of Vance Holdings. Every dollar Brandon spent came from my signature. Every car you drove was leased in my name. You were living in my world, Vanessa. You were a guest in my reality. Vanessa shook her head. No, that's not true. Brandon said you were retired. He said you were out of the game. I was, I said, until 3 days ago, until you stood over my son's grave and checked your Instagram, until you told me to go die in a dumpster, until you tried to send my grandson to a military school so you could sleep with your boyfriend in peace. I looked at Jared. He shrank back into his chair, trying to become invisible. I know about Blackwood Academy, I said. I know about the yacht. I know about the $400,000 you charged to the credit card in the last 72 hours. Vanessa's eyes went wide. You know, I know everything I said. I have been watching every transaction. I have been recording every conversation. And do you know why I let you do it? She didn't answer. She couldn't speak. She was trembling. I let you do it because I wanted you to hang yourself, I said. I wanted you to sign that loan agreement with the bank. I wanted you to rack up that debt. Because now that we have established that the estate is not yours and the trust is not yours, do you know whose debt that is? I pointed at her. It is yours, Vanessa. Yours alone. You owe the bank $10 million for a line of credit you obtained under false pretenses. You owe the credit card company $400,000 for unauthorized spending. You are not a millionaire. You are negative $10 million. You are bankrupt. You are finished. Vanessa's knees gave out. She slumped against the table, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, amidst the broken glass and melting ice. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide and vacant. The reality had finally hit her. The wall had collapsed. But, she stammered, but I am family. I laughed. It was a short, cold sound. Family, I repeated. Family is the people who stand by you in the rain. Family is the people who respect your grief. Family is not a woman who breaks a picture of a dead mother because she wants to make a point. I turned to Arthur. Give her the check, Arthur. Arthur pulled a check from the folder. He walked over and dropped it onto her lap. $9,000. Take it, I said. It should be enough to rent a small apartment and buy a suit for your bankruptcy hearing. Vanessa looked at the check. Her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't pick it up. Jared stood up. He looked at Vanessa on the floor. He looked at the check. Then he looked at me too. Didn't sign anything, he said quickly. His voice was high and panicked. The loan, the cards, her name is on everything. I was just the driver. Vanessa looked up at him. Jared, help me. Jared backed away toward the door. Babe. I mean, Vanessa. This looks bad. I can't be involved in this. I have a record. I can't go down for fraud. You coward, Vanessa screamed, reaching out for him. You spent the money too. You wanted the boat. I didn't sign the paper, Jared shouted. He looked at me. Sir, I am leaving. I am breaking up with her. I don't want any trouble. He turned and ran. He ran out of the conference room, leaving the heavy doors swinging behind him. Vanessa watched him go. The betrayal was absolute. She was alone on the floor with nothing but a check for $9,000 and a dress that was starting to smell like fear. I looked down at her one last time. You wanted the trash taken out, Vanessa, I said. I gestured to the empty doorway where Jared had just fled. It looks like the trash took itself out. Vanessa's eyes rolled back in her head. The stress, the heat, the debt, the abandonment. It was too much. She slumped forward, fainting dead away on the expensive carpet. Arthur looked at her over his spectacles. Shall I call an ambulance? He asked calmly. I stepped over her. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Call security first, I said. Have them escort her out. If she needs a doctor, she can pay for it with her severance check. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The old man was gone. The wolf was fed. But we were not done yet. There was still the matter of the house, and there was still the matter of my grandson. Let's go, Arthur, I said, turning away from the window. I have a promise to keep to a little boy. Arthur pulled another document from his briefcase. It was not a check. It was not a will. It was a photocopy of the loan agreement Vanessa had signed at the bank less than 24 hours ago. The paper made a sliding sound as it moved across the mahogany table. To my ears, it sounded like the blade of a guillotine coming down. "There is one final matter," Arthur said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "We have discussed what you do not have. Now we must discuss what you do owe." Vanessa was still staring at the $9,000 check in her lap. She looked up slowly, her eyes unfocused. "What do you mean, owe?" she whispered. "I don't owe anything." Brandon was rich. Arthur tapped the document with his index finger. "Yesterday afternoon, you entered the First Sovereign Bank," Arthur said. "You met with Mr. Sterling. You requested a bridge loan of $10 million to purchase a yacht. Is that correct?" Vanessa nodded dumbly. "Yes." "But that was against the inheritance. The bank said they would pay it off once the probate cleared." Arthur leaned forward. "Correct," Arthur said. "The bank agreed to pay it off from the proceeds of the estate if you were the beneficiary of said estate." He paused, letting the silence stretch out until it was almost unbearable. "However, since we have just established that you are not the beneficiary and that the estate owes you nothing, the collateral for that loan does not exist." Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Arthur flipped the page to the section he had highlighted, the section Vanessa had been too busy dreaming about yachts to read. Clause 7, paragraph B. Arthur read aloud. "In the event that the borrower's claim to the collateral is denied or found to be invalid, the borrower assumes full personal liability for the entire principal amount, plus interest and penalties." He looked up over his glasses. "You signed this, Vanessa. You signed it as an individual, not as an executor, not as a trustee, as Vanessa Vance, private citizen." I watched her face. It was like watching a building implode in slow motion. First the denial crumbled, then the anger collapsed, and finally the foundation of her sanity began to crack. $10 million, she breathed. Her voice was barely audible. "I owe $10 million, plus the $400,000 you spent on the credit cards," Arthur added, helpful as ever. "Since those cards were used after the date of death without authorization, that is considered theft. The bank will likely seek immediate restitution or they will press criminal charges." Criminal charges. The words hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa turned to Jared. He was still sitting there, frozen in his chair, his face a mask of sheer terror. "Jared," she said, grabbing his arm. Her nails dug into his skin. "Jared, you have to help me. We can sell the watch. We can sell the car. We can fix this." Jared pulled his arm away as if she were on fire. "The watch," he stammered, looking down at the diamond-encrusted monstrosity on his wrist. "The watch is only worth 40 grand, Vanessa. You owe 10 million. "We are a team," Vanessa pleaded. Her eyes were wide and wet. "We are in this together. You said we were kings and queens." Jared stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "No," he said, shaking his head. "No way. I didn't sign that paper. That is your signature, Vanessa. I was just there. I was just the driver." Vanessa stood up too, reaching for him. "But Jared, you told me to ask for the 10 million. You wanted the boat." "I don't recall that," Jared said, taking a step back toward the door. "I remember you wanting to show off. I remember you treating the bank manager like dirt. This is on you." He looked at me. His eyes were pleading. "Sir," he said to me, his voice cracking. "Mr. Vance, I didn't know, I swear. She told me she owned everything. She told me she was the boss. I am just a personal trainer. I don't have $10 million. I can't be involved in this." I looked at him. I saw a rat, looking for a hole in a sinking ship. "Then run," I said simply. Jared didn't hesitate. He didn't look back at the woman he had been kissing on a live stream 12 hours ago. He didn't say goodbye. He turned and sprinted for the door. Vanessa screamed. "Come back here! You coward! You parasite!" The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off her scream. She was alone. She stood there in the middle of the conference room, trembling. Her chest was heaving. Her hands were clutching the air where her lover had just been. She turned back to me. Her eyes were wild. "You did this," she hissed. "You planned this. You let me sign that loan. You knew." I stood up slowly. "I did not make you greedy, Vanessa," I said calmly. "I did not make you cruel. I simply removed the safety net and let you be yourself. You signed your own name. You dug your own grave." She looked at the table where the documents lay spread out like an autopsy of her life. The trust she couldn't touch. The house she couldn't live in. The loan she couldn't pay. $10 million, she whispered again. The weight of the number seemed to physically push her down. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, but her hands were too slippery with sweat. I saw her eyes roll back. The blood drained from her face so fast, she looked like a wax statue. She swayed once, twice, and then she fell. It wasn't a graceful fall like in the movies. It was a hard, heavy collapse. She hit the floor with a dull thud. Her head bounced against the thick carpet. The $9,000 check fluttered down from her hand and landed on her chest. Arthur stood up and walked around the table. He looked down at her unconscious form. "Well," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "that concludes the reading of the will." I looked down at her. I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. I just felt a cold sense of completion. Justice is not always happy. Sometimes it is just necessary. "Call security," I said. "Have them take her to the hospital, and tell the bank manager he can start the collection process on Monday." I stepped over her legs. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. I had a grandson to save, and a promise to keep. The sheriff's cruiser did not use a siren. It did not need to. The flashing blue lights cutting through the calm mid-morning air were loud enough. They signaled the end of the occupation. It had been 3 days since the reading of the will. 3 days since Vanessa had fainted on the plush carpet of Arthur's office. 3 days since she woke up to the reality of a $10 million debt and a life that had evaporated like mist. I stood on the inside of the wrought iron gates of the estate. The same gates she had locked me out of less than a week ago. The same driveway where she had stood on the balcony and laughed as her boyfriend threw my life into the mud. But the roles were reversed now. The script had been flipped with a precision that only the law can provide. I was wearing a suit, not the funeral suit, and certainly not the maintenance uniform. I was wearing a light gray summer suit tailored to perfection. I looked like the owner of the estate. I looked like the man who signed the checks. Vanessa stood on the other side of the bars. She looked unrecognizable. The glamorous widow in the cocktail dress was gone. In her place was a woman wearing wrinkled sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. Her hair was matted a bird's nest of neglect. She wore no makeup, revealing the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and terror. She was holding a plastic grocery bag containing the few personal items the police had allowed her to retrieve. A toothbrush, a comb, a change of underwear. That was her net worth. The sheriff, a stern man named Miller, stood a few feet behind her, his hand resting casually on his belt. He was there to ensure the eviction was peaceful. He was there to make sure the trespasser left the property of Vance Holdings, LLC. "Conrad," Vanessa choked out. Her voice was raspy. She gripped the iron bars with both hands, her knuckles white. "Conrad, please. You cannot do this." I did not move. I stood 10 feet away safely on my own land. "I am not doing anything, Vanessa," I said calmly. "The law is taking its course. You were given 72 hours to vacate the premises. You refused. Now the premises are vacating you." She dropped to her knees. She actually fell to the pavement, the gravel digging into her skin. It was a performance I had seen before, but this time there was no audience to applaud. There were no cameras. There was no Jared. "Dad," she sobbed. "Please, Dad. I am sorry. I was grieving. I was crazy with grief. You know how much I loved Brandon. I didn't mean those things I said." I looked down at her. The word Dad coming from her mouth felt like an insult. "You did not love Brandon," I said. My voice was low, but it carried clearly in the morning silence. "You loved his wallet. You loved the address. You loved the way people looked at you when you drove his car." "That is not true," she wailed, reaching a hand through the bars towards me. "I loved him. And I respected you. I was just stressed. Jared made me do it. He manipulated me." I shook my head slowly. "Do not blame the rat for eating the cheese," I said. "You opened the door, Vanessa. You invited him in. You threw my clothes in the mud. You broke Catherine's picture. You tried to send Leo to a military school. Jared didn't do that. You did." She wiped her nose on her sleeve. It was a gesture so unrefined, so pathetic that for a second I almost felt pity. But then I remembered the sound of the glass shattering under Jared's boot. I remembered her telling me to go die in a dumpster. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. Her voice broke. "The bank took my car this morning. They put a lock on my apartment downtown. My credit cards are declined. I cannot even buy a bus ticket, Conrad. I am begging you. Just let me stay in the guest house. Just for a week. Until I get on my feet. I will be your maid. I will cook for you. Anything." I took a step closer to the gate. I wanted her to see my eyes. I wanted her to see that there was no warmth left. "You told me to go die in a dumpster, Vanessa," I reminded her. "You were very specific about the location." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "I didn't mean it," she cried. "You meant every word I said. You thought you were on top of the world, and you wanted to kick me while I was down to make yourself feel taller. That is who you are. That is your character. And money can hide a lot of things, Vanessa, but it cannot hide character." I motioned to Sheriff Miller. He stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm but professional. "It is time to go. If you remain on the property, I will have to place you under arrest for trespassing." Vanessa clung to the bars. "No," she screamed. "No, I won't go. This is my house. I am Mrs. Vance." Sheriff Miller took her by the arm. He was not rough, but he was strong. He peeled her fingers off the iron bars one by one. "Come on, ma'am," he said. "Don't make me cuff you." Vanessa fought him weakly. She looked back at me, her eyes wide with panic. "Conrad, please help me. I am family." I turned my back on her. "I have a family," I said over my shoulder. "And I am going to pick him up right now. You are just a stranger who owes me $10 million. I walked toward the front door of the mansion. "Wait!" Vanessa screamed. Her voice was moving away from the gate dragged by the sheriff toward the street. "Wait, my bags. My clothes. My Hermes bags. My shoes. They are still inside. You cannot keep them. They are worth thousands." I stopped. I turned around one last time. Sheriff Miller had her by the elbow, guiding her toward the sidewalk. She was twisting her head back, looking at the house with hungry, desperate eyes. "Your bags," I called out. She stopped struggling. Hope flared in her face again. "Yes," she panted. "My bags. Just let me get my bags and I will go. I can sell them. I can survive." I smiled. It was a cold smile. "The bags were purchased with the unauthorized use of a company credit card," I said. "Therefore, they are the property of the company." "No," she gasped. "And as the CEO of the company," I continued, "I have made an executive decision regarding those assets." I pointed to a large white truck parked on the side of the house. It had a logo on the side. The Salvation Army. 2 men were coming out of the front door carrying armfuls of designer clothes and boxes of expensive handbags. I donated them, I said, to a charity for women who are actually in need. Women who have been abused. Women who have been kicked out of their homes. I thought it was poetic. Vanessa watched as her beloved collection, her armor, her identity was tossed into the back of a donation truck. She watched as a man in coveralls threw a $20,000 Birkin bag onto a pile of used coats. "You monster!" she shrieked. Her scream was raw, a primal sound of loss. "That is mine. You cannot give away my life." "It is already gone, Vanessa," I said. "Just like the house, just like the money, just like your dignity." Sheriff Miller pulled her away. "That is enough, ma'am," he said. "Walk. Now." She stumbled down the driveway, her plastic bag swinging by her side. She was sobbing loudly, a jagged, broken sound that echoed off the stone walls of the estate. I stood there and watched until she was just a small figure at the end of the road. I watched as she stopped at the corner, looking left and right, realizing she had no car, no Uber coming, no destination. Neighbors were coming out of their houses, the same neighbors she had tried to impress with her parties. They stood on their manicured lawns, watching the widow Vance walking away in sweatpants. They did not wave. They did not offer help. They knew the story. In a town like this, news travels faster than light. They knew she was a fraud. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of jasmine and sea salt. It smelled clean. For the first time in 5 years, the toxicity was gone from the house. The parasite had been removed. I did not feel happy. Happiness is for weddings and birthdays. I felt relieved. I felt the heavy weight of duty lifting off my shoulders. I had done the hard thing. I had done the necessary thing. I looked at the donation truck. The driver gave me a thumbs up. "Good haul, sir," he said. "This stuff will help a lot of people." "Thank you," I said. "Just take it far away. I don't want to see it again." I walked back into the house. My house. It was quiet inside. The power had been turned back on that morning. The air conditioning was humming softly. The lights were warm. I walked into the living room. The spot where my wife's favorite chair used to be was empty. Vanessa had thrown it out to make room for a modern white sofa that looked like a dentist's waiting room bench. I made a mental note to burn that sofa. I walked to the fireplace. On the mantel there was an empty space, the space where Catherine's picture had stood for decades. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the silver frame. I had spent the last 2 days straightening the metal and replacing the glass. The photo was a little creased, where Jared's heel had grounded into the mud, but Catherine's smile was still there. Bright, warm, eternal. I placed the picture back on the mantel. "I am sorry it took so long, Catherine," I whispered, "but the house is ours again." I touched the cool glass of the frame. "Now I have one more stop to make," I told her photo. "Our grandson is waiting." I turned and walked out of the room. The silence of the house was no longer empty. It was peaceful. It was ready to be a home again. I parked the beast right in the loading zone of St. Jude's Academy. The vehicle was a 40-foot expedition-grade recreational vehicle, a machine that looked like a tank designed by a luxury hotel. It had tires the size of a man and a grille that could push through a brick wall. It was the kind of vehicle that screamed adventure. It was the kind of vehicle my son Brandon had always dreamed of buying, but never did, because Vanessa said it was too trashy. Well, Vanessa was gone, and the trashy truck was here. The other parents in the pickup line stared. They sat in their polished sedans and SUVs looking at my monstrosity with a mix of horror and envy. I did not care. I sat in the driver's seat, tapping my fingers on the leather-wrapped steering wheel, waiting for the bell. At 3 o'clock, the doors opened. The sea of blue blazers flowed out. I saw Leo immediately. He was walking with his head down just like the last time I saw him. He was clutching his backpack straps, his knuckles white. He looked terrified. He thought he was walking to a car that would take him to the airport and then to a military school in Alabama. He thought his life as he knew it was over. I honked the horn. It was a deep, resonant blast that shook the leaves on the trees. Leo jumped. He looked up. He saw the massive gray truck. He frowned, confused. Then the window rolled down and I leaned out. "Get in, soldier," I yelled. "The mission is moving to phase 2. Leo's jaw dropped. He blinked once, twice. Then a smile broke across his face, a smile so bright it outshined the sun. He didn't just run, he sprinted. He dodged a teacher who tried to tell him to walk. He threw his backpack into the mud and scrambled up the high metal steps into the passenger seat. "Grandpa," he gasped, breathless. "You came. You really came." I reached over and ruffled his hair. "I told you I would," I said. "I promised. And a Vance never breaks a promise." He looked around the cab of the RV. His eyes widened as he took in the dashboard filled with screens, the plush leather seats, the small refrigerator stocked with his favorite sodas. "Is this ours?" he asked, touching the dashboard tentatively. "It is," I said. "For the next few months at least." "Where are we going?" he asked, looking out the window at the school. "Are we going back to the mansion?" I put the truck in gear. The engine roared to life, a low, powerful rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "No," I said. "The mansion is just a house, Leo. We are going somewhere better. We are going to go see the things your dad wanted to see. We are going to Yellowstone. We are going to the Grand Canyon. We are going to find a lake so quiet you can hear a fish jump." Leo sank back into the seat. He let out a long sigh, the tension leaving his small body. "What about Mom?" he asked quietly. I kept my eyes on the road. I knew this question was coming. I had prepared for it. I was not going to lie to him, but I was not going to burden him with the ugly details of her fraud either. Not yet. "Your mother has gone on her own journey," I said carefully. "She made some mistakes, Leo. Big mistakes. And now she has to fix them. She won't be living with us anymore." Leo was silent for a moment. He looked down at his hands. "Is she going to jail?" he asked. He was a smart kid. Too smart. He had heard the arguments. He had seen the police cars. "I don't know," I said honestly. "That is up to the judge, but she is safe. And she is where she needs to be." Leo nodded. He didn't cry. In a way, I think he was relieved. Children know when they are not wanted. They feel the coldness even when it is wrapped in expensive clothes. Vanessa had been a cold mother, and Leo had been freezing for a long time. "Grandpa," he said, after we had merged onto the highway, leaving the city skyline behind us. "Yeah, kid." "Are we poor now?" he asked. "I heard Mom say you took all the money. She said we were going to be destitute." I laughed. It was a warm, genuine laugh that felt good in my chest. I looked at him. Leo reached into the glove box. He opened the compartment. Inside was a map, a bag of beef jerky, and a pair of aviator sunglasses, just like the ones I used to wear when I was a pilot. "Put those on," I said. He put the glasses on. They were a little too big for him, sliding down his nose, but he looked cool. He looked like Brandon. "Now look at me," I said. He looked at me. "Do we look poor to you?" He shook his head, smiling. "No. Money is just fuel," Leo, I explained. "It makes the car go. But it is not the destination. Your mother thought money was the prize. She thought if she had enough zeros in her bank account, she would be happy. But she ended up with nothing because she didn't have the things that actually matter." "What matters?" Leo asked. "Trust," I said. "Loyalty, character, and family." "But Mom is family," he said, "and she was bad." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. Family isn't just about whose blood you have in your veins, I said. That is just biology. Real family are the people who stay when the storm hits. Real family are the people who would rather sleep in a truck with you than in a mansion without you. Your dad was my family. You are my family. And we are going to be okay. Leo looked out the window. The suburbs were giving way to the countryside. The green trees were blurring by. I missed Dad, he whispered. I know, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. I miss him too. Every day. But do you know what he would say if he saw us right now? What? He would say, keep driving, I said. He would say, don't look back. Leo reached into his pocket. He pulled out the black digital watch I had given him the tracker. Do I still need to wear this? He asked. The mission is over, right? I smiled. The rescue mission is over, I said. But the adventure is just beginning. Keep it. It is a reminder. A reminder of what? A reminder that no matter how far we go, I will always know where you are, I said. And you will never have to be alone again. Leo leaned back in his seat. He put his feet up on the dashboard, something Vanessa would have screamed at him for doing. Cool, he said. We drove west. The sun began to set, painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. It was the same sun that had set on my grief 3 days ago. But now it looked different. It looked like a promise. I turned on the radio. Classic rock filled the cabin. I was 67 years old. I had lost my wife. I had lost my son. I had lost a daughter-in-law I never really had. But as I looked at the boy sleeping in the passenger seat clutching a bag of beef jerky, I knew I hadn't lost everything. I had saved the future. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked clear. It has been 6 months since I drove the expedition truck away from the gates of the academy. 6 months of open roads and campfires. 6 months of watching my grandson learn how to fish, how to build a fire, and how to laugh again. The shadows under his eyes are gone. The fear that used to make him flinch when a door slammed is gone. He is just a boy now. A happy, noisy, messy 10-year-old boy. We are currently parked by a lake in Montana. The water is so clear it looks like glass. The air smells of pine needles and freedom. It is a world away from the toxic luxury of the Hamptons. It is a world away from the lies. This morning, while Leo was skipping stones across the water, I received an email from Arthur. The subject line was simply, "Case closed." I opened the attachment. It was a digital clipping from a local newspaper back home. It was buried in the back pages, the section reserved for petty crimes and bankruptcies. But the photo was unmistakable. It was Vanessa. She did not look like the woman who had thrown champagne parties. She did not look like the woman who had demanded 5-star service. In the photo, she was walking out of a courthouse wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit. Her hair was graying at the roots. Her face was lined with bitterness. The article was short. It detailed the finalization of her bankruptcy. The court had liquidated everything she owned to pay off a fraction of the $10 million debt. The rest would hang over her head for the rest of her life, garnishing every paycheck she ever earned. But the real story was in the paragraph below. It mentioned that Vanessa was currently employed as a night shift waitress at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city. The article noted that she had been fired from her previous job for arguing with customers. I zoomed in on the photo. I looked at her eyes. There was no light in them, just a dull, angry emptiness. She had wanted to be a queen. Now she was serving eggs to truck drivers at 3 a.m, probably complaining to anyone who would listen that she used to be rich. She was trapped in the past, reliving her 3 days of glory, while her future rotted away. And Jared. Arthur included a separate note about him. It seems loyalty among thieves really is a myth. Jared had been arrested 2 months ago in Miami. He was trying to run a scam selling fake investment opportunities to retirees. When the police caught him, he tried to blame it on his partners. He is currently awaiting trial and looking at 5 to 10 years in a federal prison. I put the tablet down. I looked out at the lake. I did not feel happy. I did not feel a surge of triumph. I just felt a quiet sense of balance. The scales had been tipped, and now they were even. Vanessa had told me to go die in a dumpster. It was a cruel thing to say to a grieving father. But in a strange twist of fate, she was the one who ended up in the trash heap of society. She threw away a family that would have protected her. She threw away a son who loved her. And she threw away her own dignity for a handful of cash that wasn't even hers. I watched Leo on the shore. He had found a frog and was trying to catch it. He was laughing. That laughter was my victory, not Vanessa's poverty, not Jared's prison sentence. Those were just consequences. But Leo's happiness, that was the prize. I realized then that the war was never really about the money. It was never about the house or the trust fund. It was about defining what it means to be alive. Vanessa thought life was about consuming. She thought if she ate enough, drank enough, and bought enough, she would finally feel full. But she was a black hole. No amount of money could ever fill the void where her character should have been. I walked down to the water's edge. Leo looked up and grinned, holding up the muddy frog. "Look, Grandpa," he shouted. I caught him. "Good job, soldier," I said. "Now let him go. He has a family too." Leo gently placed the frog back in the water. We watched it swim away. Grandpa Leo asked, wiping his muddy hands on his jeans, "Do you think Mom ever thinks about us?" I looked at the ripples in the water. "I think she thinks about what she lost," I said, "but I don't think she understands why she lost it. And that is the saddest part of all." I put my arm around his shoulders. "Come on, kid," I said. "Let's go make some lunch. We have a long drive tomorrow." "Where are we going next?" he asked. "Wherever the road takes us," I said. As we walked back to the truck, I looked back one last time. The sun was shining. The world was big and beautiful and full of second chances for those who earn them. I am Conrad Vance. I am a father. I am a grandfather. And I am a survivor. If you are listening to this story and you are facing a storm in your own life, remember this. The truth is a slow runner, but it never gets tired. It might take years, it might take a lifetime, but eventually it crosses the finish line. Don't let the greedy people of the world change who you are. Don't let them make you bitter. Just be smart, be patient, and keep the receipts. Because in the end, the trash always takes itself out. This is the end of my story. But for Leo and me, it is just the beginning. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have forgiven her? Or did she get exactly what she deserved? Until next time, stay strong and watch your back. You never know who is holding the knife.